Let's build a cigar box guitar. Picked up this box today at the vendor mall. Overpaid for it. I don't like to pay $10 for a box, but it's really nice when it's big. It's about 8 inches by 12 inches, 8.5 by 12. Got the tax stamp on it. It says Balboa Natural. I haven't run across one of these before. Got a cherry plank here. It's been in the barn for literally about 50 years. Already made a couple of necks out of this. Should work out well. Also got a piece of walnut here for, hopefully I can rip this and get a couple 3 fretboards out of it. So my philosophy is cut everything. It's bigger. It's easier to take a little more wood off than it is to put some back on. So I always cut my necks about 2.5 inches wide. That way it's probably big enough even if you decide to do a 6-string. But then you've got plenty of room to do a taper. If you're doing a banjo, you've got room to do a headstock usually. So that's just my method.
So ripping that cherry board, we'll make 2 pieces, run the walnut through, slice a couple pieces off of that, and try and pick the best result. Run it through the planer. Thickness sander would be nice for the fretboard, but I don't have one, so I'm just going to stack it on one of the neck boards and run it through. A little bit sketchy, but just take little cuts. You'll see quite a bit of sketchy stuff in this video if you stick around.
So scarf joint angles, about 10%. I like it a little bit steeper, maybe 12. I don't know. So what we got set up here is just this block, using it for a slide on the bandsaw. There's lots of better ways to do this, but we've got to work with what we've got. So we've got a bandsaw. So we made this jig here. It should, got this figured right.
Jig didn't work as well as I was anticipating.
So how did that turn out? Not too good.
Yeah. So just truing that up. Can't really see it on camera, but you just need to make sure that that's square, so or your headstock's going to be leaning off to the east or the west. Using that sander, just getting them the same. You can compare them to each other. It should go back like a straight board. That angle isn't crucial. Just need enough to get some string tension on it. So glue it together. I usually use a board sort of as a little jig like that in the vise, and then make sure that it's straight. I've had those drift and pretty much junk them out. So there, it had dried overnight.
Okay, so that set up overnight. Still wouldn't want to stress it too much, but it should be plenty strong to work with a little bit. So now we're going to true up the surface by stacking it like this and running it through the planer.
That's a sketchy operation right there. And it did tilt and kind of chew on the end of the board a little bit, but it was all scrap that was coming off anyway.
So right now, what we need to do is figure out where we want the bridge to go. Now I see a lot of people put the bridge way at the very edge of it to sort of maximize the length of that, but you don't have near as much acoustic response over here. So usually I want to go about 2/3 towards the
keep interrupting.
Let's narrow everything up to right at 2 inches.
keep interrupting myself. High production value. Just narrowing the whole neck and fretboard up to 2 inches. Then edging the neck. So that's a fretboard template. I printed off a Fret Defined. If I think I'll put a link in the description. What I'm doing is I'm scoring the neck with that utility knife through the line on the template after getting it square with the wood, and then I'll use that score mark and put a sharp pencil in it and a square and mark each fret. I used to lay these things out with the calipers and measure from the end, and this just works better. You got to be careful printing that template because the scaling on the printer can be off a little bit, but just check it. And here I'm using a scroll saw to cut the fret slots. I used to hand saw all of these with mixed results. I'm actually using my thumb against the back of the blade in its backwards, just getting it level, doing it all by eyeball with the lines. And I get pretty good results like this. Now laying out a center line on the neck. Need to work off that center line for the rest of the time. If you cut the neck, cut the fretboard out, I mean, you just end up with a little bit of bridge angle if you get it off a little bit, but cut off the overall length. And clamping it on.
Alright, let's take it out and see what we've got.
Okay, so that had dried. Checking it out here. And save that little block that you take out off the end of it. You're going to need that if you've got an overlap on your box and your fretboard. Camera angle set well. So now that's the stacked heel dowel. That clamp down using the table. Probably sticking the whole thing to the bench. Okay, get that straight. I should have waited on this. I usually do this step another day, but I got in a hurry and glued those on, and they drifted a little bit, and I had to clean it up. Those wings for the headstock. Really need that out where you can see it.
Alright, let's see what we got. Problem is, no matter what we got, I'm still going to make a final decision. Drop test.
Whoops. I'm not really that bald. That's a trick with a camera. Okay, so now I'm marking the spot for the hole in the box for the dowel.
How did it turn out? Not too good. As I mentioned that I really like this box.
And I'm chunking some wood off. Apparently I forgot to turn on the camera when I did the initial shape on that headstock.
So how did that turn out? Not too good. No, actually, I mean, just taking, most people wouldn't recommend running it through the saw like that, but I'm just taking extra wood off. I'm going to shape it on the sander.
I use that big table sander for everything. I've got a 60 grit belt on it. It's like a big mechanical beaver. It'll really throw some wood, but it makes a mess. Just doing this mostly by eyeball right now. I'll get the calipers out and check some stuff out. And it's not always perfect results. I'm not exactly... I don't think
Most people have a nice horse, you know, that they can mount the neck in to carve it. What we got is this sander and this old pair of blue jeans right here.
I keep interrupting myself, but what I was saying is I don't think C.F. Martin's going to see this and come after me, you know, make a special recruitment trip or anything. So I'm using a cheese grate, rasp, a couple of file rasps around the headstock here. Kind of see the color of the wood change and get it straight. I'll check it out with a straight edge here and there, but it's more or less just a sculpture. You know, they're all going to be different. I don't have the greatest symmetry, I guess, but it usually comes out pretty good. Just don't get your calipers out checking. Most important thing is that the strings run straight down the neck, and of course the frets are in the right place. And neck angle is important, or you'll have a bridge that's too short or too tall. But got the DA sander there. It's got 60 grit on it too. I'm using it for shaping.
Life is too short for worn out sanding discs.
Yeah, what he said. That thing will chew some wood. Be careful around that volute there on the end of the neck. You make sure you've got it out of your way for hand placement, or that banjo C chord's going to be a problem. I'm actually holding the...
Okay, so it's roughed out. It's not finished. We got a lot of evening up to do on the headstock. Knot right there, not a wood knot, but it's too big right there. You do some hand sanding and then probably hit the power tools a little more.
Holding the finished product here. Noodling on it a little bit. We'll demo at the end of the video. Check and make sure that headstock's straight. Straight on the neck. Turned out pretty well. Just don't get your calipers out checking it. Did I mention I'm not really that bald or fat? It's all a camera angle. Shaping it up. Now watch the fat guy sand his neck. Probably could have cut some of this out or sped it up a little bit faster. Just doing some hand sanding, checking it out.
Okay, let's sand it down with 120 sandpaper. That's going to be good enough. Pretty happy with peg egg shape. Needs a little bit of work. No sense in trying to smooth it out any more than this until we get the frets in it. Getting it down to ready to put finish on. Get some markers in it and everything. A couple of flaws showed up in the wood. Nothing serious. Gives it a little character. It's pretty rustic. We'll say we built it rustic. We'll call it intentional when it's really the best we can do. Kind of skipped over the part where we want to cap this. I'm going to mark that out real quick.
Just a scrap of veneer that I had left over from before, but it's out of some of that same walnut. Just roughing the shape of it out to keep it out of the way of the clamps. No way of getting that perfect, for me anyway. I have to sort of reshape it on the neck. Using the tight bond too. I was saying I'm holding the finished product. I was planning on noodling around with
Always good. It's always good to have plenty of clamps.
but I keep forgetting to do it. So let it dry overnight, just kind of trimming up the edges of it a little bit, and then I'll shape it up against the belt sander. Easy to mess up. Ended up with having to reshape because I'm too sloppy or get in a hurry, but it's what I do. Checking it out. A little more sanding. Showing the grit of the sandpaper, I think I'd switch to like 220 or something. And then 300 grit or so. That box had a really nice paper sticker on it, but I decided it was going to muffle the sound. I tried to get it off with a heat gun. That didn't work, so I just sanded it off. It was really on there. And my camera angle's off, but I'm cutting the hole through the box for the dowel with one of those vibrating hobby saws. Works pretty good. Can hear watch a guy mess up and cut too much of his dowel off. Big fat guy messed up there. And so now we're going to have to build a shim to go on the end of it. No big deal. Also, cracked my box there. That was a little bit irritating, but tight bond will fix it right up. Somebody had to really look to see that. And there we are, gluing the shim on the end of our neck that the fat guy cut too short. Just braced up the inserts in the box and glued those overnight. Now, truing that up. Sand on my shim and get it fitting perfect. You want it tight, but not too tight where it warps the box. Just kind of figuring the bridge placement and checking the neck angle. The camera you can't see, but what I'll do is I'll get the neck angle set right, and then I've got a hole through the box centered down there that's about right. And so then I'll mark the angle through the hole with a pencil, but not worry about getting it centered, and then I'll drill the hole into the end of the dowel, and my neck angle should come out pretty quick, pretty close. In the past I've tried to guess at that and ended up in the wrong spot. So you see me take this box off and put it back on several times. Got me a little centering ruler there that measures from the outs. First time I've used it. I like that thing. It speeds up, especially for a fat guy that can't math. Got an old headstock that was broken off an old Applause guitar. I use that for spacing. Gotta get those holes in the right place, and it's got to be relative to the neck. Nothing really bugs me like the strings running every which direction from the nut to the tuning pegs. It's easy to do if you're a hack like me. Try to get these right. It came out reasonably close. Don't get your calipers out and check, but as far as just holding and playing it, it turned out pretty good. Alright, just taking the hand fret saw and cleaning the grooves out. The kerf on my scroll saw blade is a little bit tight, but that'll fix that. Double checking where my markers will go. That's kind of a slap happy way of doing that, but it's going to be covered up if it's a little bit of fraying in the holes there. Do a pilot hole and then run them out. A little bit bigger from the back. Marking out where the side markers will go. And dimpling those. So, like I said, this one I'm building for myself. If I was building one that was going to somebody else, I would use bigger fret markers on the face of the fretboard. But for myself, I either do none or I just use the side marker material. I don't know. I just like it like that. And this one, I want it to look sort of old-timey and don't want them noticeable with big markers. So I decided to put them down the edge of the neck and just the little small plastic pinpoint markers, just in case I'm looking at it putting capo on or something. That's a PetSmart pet fence marker there. That's got a solid white plastic post on it. Dog couldn't learn where his perimeter was from them, but they do make decent side markers. There's that block I cut off the end of the neck to go under where the fretboard extends, so I don't break it off messing with these frets. Right now I'm just cutting them to length. I used to drive them in right off the roll of fret wire, but it's really a lot easier to keep from having them sharp on the edge if you cut them to length and then grind that tang back on the bottom of the fret a little bit, which is what I'm doing right here. Just kind of cutting the little T-tang off the bottom of it that goes into the fret slot on the edges. And I'll dress the ends of them on the neck. Most of them I've cut a little bit too long. It just makes them easier to have a spot to hold on to. I don't have a arbor press to put them in. I've always used that little rubber mallet. I got it at the Dollar Tree years ago. Works for me. Also, this is the really cheap brass nickel fret wire. It comes on a roll. It's about $1 a foot. Most people wouldn't recommend that, but it sure does work a lot easier than the EVO or the stainless fret wire. I've had some of it. What was my main banjo player for probably 5 years or 4 years, and I'm not hard on them, but I don't bend them like Willie or whatever. I just kind of a straight fretter, I guess. It sure does work easy. And seems to hold up reasonably well for me. Trimming the edges of them. Keep that block in there to hammer it down. Clean up the edges of them. I use that DA sander. You can end up with little hills around them if you're not careful. Gotta be careful with the pressure and seating them in. I've got a little jig that goes under it. I broke off a headstock or two not paying attention to that, so the fat guy does mess up quite a bit. Just doing a little initial level there with a good hardwood straight block and some 300 grit sandpaper. Now doing the final sand on it before putting some finish on there. Even that up a little bit. Re-hand sand it. I mean, I did mention I'm not really that bald, didn't I? kind of scuff it up a little bit, hammering those frets in. So this should clean all that up reasonably well. Just checking that volute there at the end of the headstock, make sure it's not going to be in the way on put it back on the box, I guess, to check the angle. Now, cleaning it off a little bit. On this one, I'm using just the Zizzer shellac from Walmart in a spray can. I really like True Oil better, but it takes several days between coats and more coats. This one, like I said, I'm building it for myself. I want a matte finish on the neck. Let that dry and went back inside. And I cut a sound hole in it. F-holes are cool. They're harder to do, and I've got to work. Like I'm building this for myself. I want it to be rustic looking, so I'm just using a hole saw. Got to be careful with the hole saw. Things wobbling all over the place. Oh, clean that up. Don't leave that ragged. I don't know. That's a pet peeve. Okay, now using that first coat for kind of a sand and sealer. Going over it with a 300 grit. Now, I'll only put the one coat on the fretboard probably, and I'll use a block to clean that off. Most people wouldn't put shellac on the fretboard, but it's so much quicker and easier to do the whole thing, and I'll clean the tops of the frets off before I fit in these tuners. Those are the cheap. The sealed ones, just I seem to have better luck with them. They're inexpensive. I don't think any of the stuff I'm using here came from any of the parts houses, the US based parts houses. If you're doing one for yourself, I'd recommend using one of those guys. They're gonna give you quality stuff. You order this junk off eBay or whatever, and it's gonna be hit or miss. Uh, like the fret wire and that kind of stuff, I kind of buy it in bulk like this, but I like to keep stuff around, order up ahead. Same on the electronics when I use them, but I definitely I'm glad that the parts houses like CB Giddy and MJ, those guys exist. They're great. I definitely recommend if you're going to build one for yourself, they'll help you out. They know what they're doing, unlike the fat guy in the video. Doing a little block sanding, doing a little initial fret level here. Looking pretty good. Clean up that sound hole a little more. Figuring out how tall the bridge is going to be. I've got a little wedge there. Floating bridge with a tailpiece on the end. Well, making a bone nut for it. It's got a 0 fret, which I didn't mention. I used a slightly bigger fret. Not everybody does that. It gives you a little bit more leeway, and I actually like the way that feels, but I keep some bigger fret wire for a 0 fret at the end. So this is more of a string holder. That's a piece of bone, some old cow bones that the dogs drug up in the yard. I took them away and used them to make nuts and cap bridges with them. This is the part where I sand the ends of my fingers and nails off and mess up my claw hammer playing for a while. Don't do what I do, boys and girls. I'm not always the safest, especially around that sander. Okay, now I'm using a Dremel with a little cutting wheel on it to cut the grooves in the nut or string holder. Use the yardstick there to set where I want my string edges to run, and kind of split it into 4 strings. Okay, so I've got just a little piezo pickup. I bought a big bundle of those several years ago and never used them all. I'm just going to put a simple volume switch and a piezo in it. I probably will hardly ever use it, and I might add a coil pickup later, maybe one of the top mount ones or something if I ever decide to do that, but thought it needed some kind of pickup in it. So same for the volume pots and the jacks. I ordered a bag of those from overseas and waited on them to come in. That is a brass kick plate for a door, and I am roughing out a bridge or a tailpiece and the plates for the volume knob and the jack on it with some snips here. Figuring out where I'm going to put those. Now I'm drilling a hole for a volume knob, using some emblem adhesive to put that piezo on. And there's a guy getting backwards and gluing the wire in the wrong direction for the hole. So there's a guy tearing it off, scraping the glue off and re-gluing it. I was nervous because of the camera. So figuring out where the jack goes. Clean it up, thin it up. Kind of broke loose the little inner rails on the box there. I had to glue one back in. Won't show. Using a Dremel to clean up around the hole. Had to do quite a bit of that to make it come through. I needed a better jack than that. Those jacks I got are really cheap. Now I am shaping the brass on the grinder over there without a good camera angle to see what's going on. But I'm basically just rounding the corners, cleaning the edges of it up, truing it up, pounding them flat. Center punching some holes there and drilling out for the jacks to go through and everything. Now the tailpiece, now I'm going to bend that at a 90-degree angle after I got the holes in it. Let's keep piddling around with this, but they turned out pretty nice. I don't mind mixing the brass and like the chrome tuners up. I don't think it looks bad. I guess it depends on where you do it. It's all preference. They're just kind of truing up the tailpiece a little bit. It's the simple volume knob. And I did take it in and check it with an amp and make sure everything was working before I put it in, and then again once I got the box put together. I definitely didn't want to take it back apart because of a bad solder joint or something, which isn't the end of the world. But anyway, screwing all that down. And now I'm gluing the box shut with just spot gluing it with super glue mostly and clamping it. It had a little bit of a bow in it, and that'll keep it from vibrating or something. But that super glue should pop right loose if I need in there for something. I usually like to leave the box where you can open it if I use the bottom of the box, but this one, the top of the box, looks so much better. I thought I would just use that. Do it. It actually, I had to mess with that a little bit, but Didn't put enough glue on it and had to re-glue it and re-clamp it. Came loose there around the. Hopefully I won't need it in there anytime soon. Okay. Now doing a little bit of fret dressing. It came out really well. That stuff usually goes on pretty evenly. Didn't have to do a lot. I sort of block sanded it and left the sandpaper a little bit loose, kind of clean over the top of the frets. Get that shellac off of it. And now building a bridge. It's just cherry with another little piece of that bone on top. I've got just a spare banjo bridge sitting under it right now, just kind of setting the angle that's approximately the right height. Gluing the bone on it rough and then finishing the bone. Super glue seems to work fine on that. Just checking the height. You can adjust that back and forth. It's probably, I've got it a little bit high right now, but easier to take wood off than it is to put some on. Not checking the intonation there. I was just making sure I didn't have any high frets or anything that I had missed. Putting the strings on. Coming down to the wire here. And the camera runs out here in just a second, but put the strings on and then mark where the slots go on the bridge, line everything up and cut those with a file. I think all the strings were on it, and I was in the process of filing the slots in the bridge. I file them at angles where they kind of come to a point in the middle. Just laying the strings out, mark them, file them. And this one's going to be pretty much a wrap.
Okay. We ran out of space on the old phone trying to film stringing it, so didn't catch out the end of that there. But I haven't tried to play it yet. I've just kind of tuned it up. Needs a little tweaking.
And there we have the finished guitar. The next one of these I think I'm going to do a one-piece neck with nylon string, something simple that doesn't take 40 minutes to get it all in a time-lapse video. So if you're still here, thanks for watching. This is just my method. There's probably a better way. Feel free to correct me. Remember, I have no idea what I'm doing. So if you're a first-time builder, don't go by this. Do your research. And good luck. It's a lot of fun.